The Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Rejecting women rabbi sets up a fight among the Orthodox. Hardcore pawn with some advice for your precious objects. And more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. The largest body of rabbis in North America has drawn a decisive line against women's ordination. The Rabbinical Council of America, or RCA, includes more than 700 Orthodox rabbis, many of whom self-describe as modern Orthodox and who received their ordinations at Yeshiva University. In what the RCA described as an extremely close vote, the rabbis approved a resolution declaring that its members, quote, may not ordain women into the Orthodox rabbinate, hire or ratify the hiring of a woman into a rabbinic position, or allow a title implying rabbinic ordination to be used. The issue of women's ordination in the Orthodox rabbinate has percolated over the years, and more than a half dozen women have now been ordained within the so-called Open Orthodox movement, led by Rabbi Avi Weiss of Riverdale, New York. The resolution represents the first time that the RCA as a whole is telling a portion of its members what it may not do in regard to women's ordination. If the broader membership decides to stand by the resolution in the coming years, it could lead to an explicit schism in the Orthodox world over this issue. At least one current member of the RCA, Rabbi Yosef Kanevsky of B'nai David Judea congregation in Los Angeles, would appear to be an explicit violation of the resolution's standards, as a woman currently working as an intern at his synagogue, Alyssa Thomas Newborn, was ordained in the Shivat Maharat program. Another opportunity for a clear violation by many members is the hiring of ordained women as scholars in residence, including especially women ordained in Israel who routinely tour the United States as visiting scholars. As this new reality plays out, we're likely to see the RCA and the modern Orthodox continue a shift rightward to better align with the ultra-Orthodox. Inconvenient timing for both of those groups, the Ultra-Orthodox Council of Torah Sages has issued a statement denouncing so-called open orthodoxy. The statement, signed by 11 of the most revered rabbis in the ultra-Orthodox world, declared that, quote, in our considered opinion, open orthodoxy is not a form of Torah Judaism or orthodoxy, and that any rabbinic ordination granted by any of its affiliated entities to their graduates does not confer upon them any rabbinic authority. Meanwhile, the ultra-Orthodox community has been generating news on a number of fronts this week. In the much-discussed school district of East Ramapo, New York, where ultra-Orthodox community members have joined the school board despite not having children in the public school system, the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights has found that the local school system has discriminated on the basis of race when it comes to providing special instruction. White students there receive disproportionately more special needs programming than non-white students, while the ultra-Orthodox population is almost entirely white. The Office for Civil Rights has reached a 12-point agreement with the school district and will monitor the situation. In the nearby village of New Square, an ultra-Orthodox enclave, a large celebration was held in honor of convicted arsonist Shaul Spitzer, who spent 3.5 years in jail for attempting to burn down the house of a local Hasidic man and his family when the man started praying at a different minyan than is used by the majority of the community. The victim of this attack spent more than a month in the hospital recovering from his burns and still bears his injuries. Moving on, plenty of those charged with a crime need to head to a pawn shop to make bail. And one pawn shop is more famous than most these days, featured on True TV's Hardcore Pawn. One member of that team had advice for our Meredith Gansman on fall jewelry.
Fall fashion means it's time to tuck away the summer tank tops and wrap up in warm woolen sweaters and coats. But don't forget about jewelry, says jewelry expert and star of True TV's Hardcore Pawn, Ashley Gold. Gold met me at the famed Moda Jewelry and Accessories show to check out the hottest fall jewelry trends for the season.
Mixed metals are a huge trend this holiday season and for the fall. Layering is huge right now for the fall.
Think of your sweaters and your knits, it comes to jewelry too.
Yeah, I mean, you just stack it, you layer it. She's wearing the tassels, the chunky chains. I mean, it doesn't even matter, just throw it on.
Yeah.
Throw it on. Throw it on with hoops, your beads, then her daughter's wearing the necklaces. I mean, you're just mixing everything. This is the fall fashion.
Right.
Mix it up, stack it, and have fun.
When Gold isn't styling seasonal jewelry, she is a cast member on Hardcore Pawn, a reality show set in the 50,000 square foot family-owned pawn shop, American Jewelry and Loan. Gold is the fourth generation of her family to run the store and often calls upon her Jewish heritage when objects come into the store.
You know, I always get excited when you get Kiddush cups and menorahs and mezuzahs, especially when they're sterling silver. I think that's really cool.
For customers selling to pawn stores, Gold advises check personal sentiments at the door.
Emotion does make selling tricky because if you hold on to that emotion, if great-grandmother gave you that teapot and you remember all your memories with it and you want $1,000, you're not going to get rid of that teapot because you know how much you want for it.
Also, know what you have before trying to sell it, Gold says.
A lot of people believe that they live on gold. They live on a treasure that really isn't a treasure.
And when reinvesting earnings into new jewelry, Gold always remembers her friends.
Well, you know, diamonds are a girl's best friend, and that's the number one thing that never goes out of style.
Gold showed me some diamond jewelry with a funky flair from the brand Adornia.
Her diamonds are paired with stones, so she has an edgy line. She also has, you know, the double layering of necklaces.
And this is a great necklace from Adornia to keep on your radar for the holiday season because, as you can see, it looks like two stacked triangles, but once you hook it, it becomes a Jewish star. Now the star is named star number 263 for Anne Frank's home, and it's a new take on a classic jewelry piece. Even as you cover up for the cold, jewelry can bring big color and make a statement to heat up your winter fashion. For the Jewish Channel, I'm Meredith Gansman.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, this week on Up Close, being black in America means getting treated differently from those who are white in numerous ways. Within the world of politics, the African American vote was alternately pursued and jettisoned by the major political parties for decades until the Democratic Party won over the vast majority of African Americans in the mid-20th century. Exploring the Democratic Party's approach is MSNBC's national correspondent Joy-Ann Reid, author of Fracture, Barack Obama, the Clintons, and the Racial Divide. And then, if one single event emblematized the treatment of blacks in America in the first decade of this century, it was Hurricane Katrina and the flooding of New Orleans. Journalist Gary Rivlin spent a decade reporting on what happened there for Katrina after the flood. Here are some of the highlights from my interview with Joy-Ann Reid. When you have a history of, for example, how the Democratic Party has done over the last 50 years, and it's written by a white person with mostly white sources looking at mostly how it affects white people, you get one version. And it's written by a black reporter who's looking at how it affects black people and with significantly more black sources, you get a very different story.
Yeah, and I think there's also an assumption that the Democratic Party and African Americans are just simpatico and always have been, and that there's this natural relationship that means that black people are sort of permanent Democrats. But the story that I tell in Fracture is the fact that that's the opposite is true, and that African Americans have been very pragmatic with their vote, and they've drifted back and forth between the two parties depending on the circumstances. So that, you know, in the 19th century, the African American vote, such as it was, because it was denied for most of that time, gravitated toward Republicans at post-Abraham Lincoln, and then it drifted back toward the Democrats for a lot of reasons.
The bulk of your book ends up dealing with this divide within the Democrats on this issue, on the issue of race, and on the issue of being left in general, right? And there are many times when, you know, certainly those things seemed aligned, that being a party that was serving African Americans was being a party that was serving left-wing principles. How did that divide get crossed at different points?
Well, I think that the changeover for the Democratic Party to when the idea of being the party of civil rights suddenly became an anathema to the base of the same party is when that idea moved north. When it was really the Southern segregationist, it was who was the sort of troglodyte that everyone was pointing a finger at and looking askance at. A lot of northern suburban white Democrats were fine with that and agreed with it and believed in civil rights, believed in the civil rights movement. But after a while, the movement really began to look north. It began to look at northern segregation in Philadelphia, in New York, in Chicago, in Boston. And that was not popular in the suburbs of those northern cities. People like Bill Clinton, people like Al Gore really foresaw a party that would shrink and die if it didn't find a way to re-attract white suburbanites.
So on the cover of the book, we've got Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton looking not like happy people and vaguely in each other's direction.
They do like each other.
Yeah, and there's the sense that the Democratic community was divided between black and white in 2008 to a degree. You don't find a big difference between them on policy.
I don't think you do. I think particularly since presidential administrations are in a lot of ways creatures of their predecessors, so that the next Republican who's elected is going to draw heavily from the George W. Bush administration for its expertise, its policy expertise. Hillary Clinton, the way that breach between them was healed was that she became a part of the Obama administration. So his policies are her policies. They're now one and the same. I think for Hillary Clinton, the challenge is that underneath the surface of that unanimity is a small but I think important vein of disconnect. I still talk to African Americans for whom the experience of 2008 and the things the Clintons did literally will keep them from supporting Hillary Clinton. And I've been surprised that there are people who still do say that. It's not a large contingent, but it does impact whether or not Hillary Clinton can get the not just the size of the black support she needs, but the intensity of it.
You can see the full episode of Up Close on the Jewish Channel on cable. You can also listen to the full audio of Up Close as a podcast available on iTunes or on your favorite podcast player. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well.